Well, welcome all to special Communications and Technology Commission's meeting. It's September 24th, 2020. I'm Kerry Melcher, previous chair. We have with us tonight our other commission members, Commissioner Sherman and Commissioner Brockman, and our communications director, Michael Russo, and our city planning manager, Maureen Murray, and Matt Summers, our council. Welcome all. I think Richard Sherman, Chair Sherman, if you'd like to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Sure. Would everybody put their hand, the right hand over their heart? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of
the United States of America
and
to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and
justice for all.
Well, okay. With that out of the way, tonight's agenda is specifically, we have one item on our agenda for this evening. I guess we should start off. Are there any other special announcements?
Well, we have to approve the agenda, right?
Yeah, we don't have the previous agenda or minutes.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for tonight.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Motion carried.
Announcements and introductions. Is there anything else special tonight from anybody on the commission?
I'd just like to announce, unless Mike Russo wants to do it later, the Calabasas Film Festival is happening now. It opened last night virtually, and it runs through the 27th. And you can find out all the information on calabasasfilmfestival.com. And tomorrow night there is going to be a drive-in at Gillette Ranch, a drive-in film at Gillette Ranch. But you can get all the information on calabasasfilmfestival.com. Thank you.
All right, very good. On tonight's agenda, we have a new film ordinance we'll be looking at. Do we have, Rachel, do we know if there are any speakers, public comment at this point, any cards or anybody chiming in on wants to say anything?
I see a few attendees, but if anyone would like to speak on a matter not on the agenda, they can raise their hand and I can allow them, but I do not see any hands raised at this time.
Okay. Very good. Mr. Russo, I think, would you like to take the next part and talk about our discussion item, please?
Sure. Thanks, Commissioner Melcher, as well as the other members of the commission. I'm sure you all appreciate all the good things that a local government can do, everything from law enforcement to libraries and parks to potholes. But there's one thing that a lot of people don't know about, and that's film permits. People actually do come to Calabasas to shoot scenes for movies and TV commercials, web content, and student productions and things like that. And to make sure that producers follow the rules and to help protect taxpayers' dollars while we make sure they're following the rules, we issue film permits. Now, typically Calabasas receives requests for about 30 film permits every year. Not a huge number, and it is a number we would like to see go up in the future. Now, the way this content is made has certainly changed over the years, as you can imagine. Gone are the gigantic cameras and the huge hot lights and the big crew. Although some crews can still be large, more often the entire setup is relatively small. Cameras are small, content can be turned around very quickly, even within minutes. Content can be shot, edited, and uploaded to the internet at very low cost. often that really opens up a lot of opportunities for filmmakers. So that's great, but it can also pose problems. And that's where we are today and why we need to update our film ordinance. And for more of that, we're joined by Community Development Director Maureen Tamori.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to start off by thanking Michael Russo and Rachel Beatty for helping me put together this ordinance, to Matt Summers as well, but most of all to the task force from the CTC that we've worked with for over a year now on this proposal, and that's Carrie Melcher and Michael Brockman. So thank you to the two of you for painstakingly working with the city as part of a process to go back and update the entire film ordinance, film regulations, film permitting process that moved to my department in December of 2019. So that's when it moved internally to the city, and it's being administered through the Building and Safety Department at this time. So with that, I'd like to share my screen. Here it comes. So here we go. Can everyone see this? Yes. Okay. So these are proposed revisions to the Calabasas Municipal Code, Section 5.04. It used to be called Motion Picture, Television, and Photographic Production. It's actually its name today, but we need to add another component to that name, which is the element that Michael spoke about, which is digital media. This quick content done on a home computer, uploaded into the big net, that is currently, I don't want to say unregulated, but undefined, and it needs to be recognized in a new technology revision for film work that's primarily happening all around Los Angeles, the city, the world, but especially right here in Calabasas. So there's two goals that brought this issue before us. The first I mentioned is the inclusion of digital media as regulated in this chapter. But the second component is the strengthening of conditions for the city to approve or deny the issuance of a film permit. Now, this is interesting. We have had a lot of yeses, but we're entering into an age in which no's might be required for certain types of filmmakers. And it is this group that come to us through digital media that we brought to the attention of your task force and worked with them and the California Film Commission to come up with proposed revisions here tonight. This is the first of effectively two big phases. This is the ordinance, so this is the law that will come into play through the council when it's finally adopted by them. But the other piece is a phase 2 piece, which is an update to the policies and procedures that are used to kind of do that fine-tuned regulation of film permitting in the city. Also an update to our fees, inclusion of people like film monitors that we have not had in our film fee set structure to date. And for that, we will propose to work in this next phase, again, through the task force and the California Film Commission. So I'm gonna kind of walk through what those revisions are within the code, and then ask for any questions that the commission might have so that we can address them, give you our thought process behind why we enacted them. So the revisions of note. First is a very simple one. On a permit, we would like the property owner's consent. Believe it or not, under the old code, we would issue permits to anyone who came in who represented that they were a filmmaker, were willing to take on the liability of the film, but not for the property owner when it was being shot at a specific location. So we've asked for that consent, and the reason why is because in our code for our administrative procedures, that is a responsible party. If something goes wrong, we want their consent to the activities that are occurring. The second thing that the code does in these revisions is to strengthen the findings for approval or denials. And I think that this commission is very familiar when it acts as a planning commission to what a finding is. It's effectively a statement of goal. Our goal is that this should not affect, let's say, safety and welfare. And a finding requires the city to say why it won't do that, why the issuance of the permit can be made because it meets the findings. So they're basically broad goals and objectives that the city must find are available or will not be affected through the issuance of a film permit. We actually added in a denial provision specifically, which is any open code enforcement case. So if I have a house where I've received a lot of code referrals with regard to parties or these kinds of situations, I open a code enforcement case because potentially I need to go to court to actually shut that activity down. What we have had in the past is those party houses were really film houses for that digital content that was being produced. This way we can deny the issuance of a permit, even if they came forward for that to that particular case, but also seek recovery of costs if we did have to go to court to be able to collect from those entities under these revised rules. We simplified after our discussions with the Film Commission and with the task force for the CTC, how to simplify our film permit process for extending films. We used to require, for example, a 500-foot radius notification collection of signatures. That's huge. In the event that somebody just wanted an extra day of filming. Now we're taking a look at just those property owners in the immediate vicinity bordering the large area of the film shoot and seeking their consent to extend a film permit. The other things we did was begin to put those control in place for the party houses. And this is the kind of event where the content is actually a party for the digital media. You invite over 60 people, you throw a party, you do crazy things in a house, you film it, and then you upload it to YouTube. From YouTube, that the number of hits actually generates finances back to the entity at the party house. So we defined who gets to be on site. No longer is there a defined cast and crew when you invite over 60, 80, up to 200 people to these parties. We've controlled who gets to stay on site and who gets to stay there overnight. An overnight stay was never an issue that we had to deal with before, but unfortunately what we find is that there is an ability to use the party house, because these are typically large mansions with upwards of 10 bedrooms. And each of those bedrooms can individually be a party itself that can go all night and you can flop there. While we appreciate people flopping and not drinking and driving anywhere, the use of these houses for commercial purposes becomes problematic. So if you're charging for a room and then using whatever happens in that room as part of your content, we have violations of the zoning code, which really seek to have quiet enjoyment of residential neighborhoods. Part of what is happening is a whole new group of filmmakers And we're going to call them social influencers because that seems to be the term of art that's used for these individuals, usually young people. And I know we're all young here, so we relate to the creativity of these groups. So an influencer is a content creator with a social media following. There are influencers that have up to 20 million people following them. We have large influencers in the city that have upwards of 10 million people following them. Social media influence develop a following by sharing everything that's going on in this house, their content, their events that inspires, entertains, informs, and connects them with their followers. Some content producers run a weekly show, some a daily post. It can be at all, it's unlimited. It's just how much effort do you want to put into the content of your particular product. Influencers do another thing. They start social conversations. They drive engagement. And they set trends among a receptive audience, which positions them. The more people you get, the more a brand is interested in sponsored content. So let's say you are Nike shoes and you can find an influencer with 5 million followers to wear or promote Nike apparel as part of the content, their party, their swim race, their diving board contest, whatever they happen to do to engage their group. That would be what an influencer does. To give you a sense of how large an issue is, this is a article that ran in the New York Times. It's all about the influencers and these houses. This is another article from the LA Times. These houses are where the content are created. So you find an individual, you place them as a marketing agent, just like no different than a film agent would place them inside a house, usually a large house, usually a group of people in those houses, and those houses get names. And then you basically follow the influencers in that house, but the name of the house, big homes, 10 bedrooms, 5, 10, $20 million mansions. The particular article was about Los Angeles. And I'll just give you a flavor. This one article, give you the names of the houses. Sway House, Hype House, Clubhouse, Donkey House, Girl in the Valley House, Young Fitness House, Alpha House, Kids Next Door House, the Drip Crib, the Vice House, the Vlog Squad House, and the Clout House were all mentioned in just one article, all within about 20 miles of Calabasas. We have currently 2 houses here in the city. So this is a phenomenon that is of great interest to this commission because it's a new way of doing media. It can be highly disruptive to people who live in the community adjacent to these homes. There is very little the city can do to regulate these homes when all of the content is happening indoors. And I'll read for you one little quote from the New York Times article by a talent manager. He says, for the Domini House in North Hollywood, his clients are only allowed to go out for very select opportunities and only because the collaborator has been isolated in the house for at least 2 weeks. So these are used to right now for part of COVID screenings and COVID isolation. But what they also do within that 2 weeks is create content, and tons of it. So we're happy to walk through all of the details of the ordinance revision. That might bore you. So I'm simply going to say that our recommendation is to recommend to the City Council to adopt this ordinance. It'll be called 2020-384, and it'll amend CMC, which is Calabasas Municipal Code, to now be called the Motion Picture Digital Media, Television and Photographic Production Code. With that, that's my short presentation, and I'm open to questions. And I want to thank those of you who have sent me comments up front.
There you go.
Is my screen off? Yep. Okay. I don't know if Matt Summers had anything to add in at all.
Yeah, I'll add one or two further comments. So thank you again to the subcommittee and to the Film Commission, whose rep, I forget the name, for their comments on the ordinance. We sent it to the State Film Commission as required by state law, which requires any ordinance regulating film production to go through the Film Commission for their review and comment. But it was also helpful to get that industry perspective and to ensure that we don't adopt something that is not workable. As noted, the goal is not at all to harm legitimate commercial filming within Calabasas. Rather, the goal is to create appropriate regulatory tools to ensure that legitimate commercial filming continues to be a valued member and enterprise in the city's business community, and that it is not undermined by this new style of filming that tends to severely harm residential neighborhoods by taking regular standard residential backyards and converting them into film studio backlots. And that's, you'll see throughout the edits, the intention captured there to ensure that filming doesn't negatively harm the neighbors, particularly in residential areas. And with that, I will say we are available for questions on any particular provision. And
I have a more general question before we get into specifics. So if someone has a large home and they try to bypass, even though they're going to do digital filming in their backyard and in their living room and so forth, but they don't even apply for an application. So is it just code enforcement if someone complains? How does that work? Because with not having to bring sometimes big equipment in, we may not even know they're doing it.
No, that's certainly true. If someone is filming inside a large house and they keep it contained and they don't generate any neighbor complaints, then we likely won't find out about it. If, however, they do generate neighbor complaints because they're doing activities outside, or because of the amount of people that come to the house, or because of, you know, imagine someone who brought up one of those studio trailers for folks, the green room trailers, parks that on a residential driveway. There's a signal. But yes, it would continue to be the city's existing policy of complaint-based code enforcement. And that's where we ask residents, if they see obvious filming activity at a property, to call the city, and city will let them know, oh yeah, there's a permit for that, and here's the rules for the permit, X days, Y hours, or no, we don't have a permit, we'll take a look at it. And it becomes one more tool in our toolbox for the properties that don't have permits and that both don't have permits and don't think they need permits, or simply don't care. And that the hope is here to have a tool on top of the existing tools we do have regarding the zoning code and the nuisance ordinances.
Thank you.
If I could add a little bit to that, these videos are uploaded. The question is, where can we find them if we want to pursue a code enforcement case? We have had influencers upload to YouTube. If we're lucky, we find it, we can take a film of that content, but then if it's removed, it's gone. And what we find is with some code enforcement cases, we have to immediately jump on an opportunity, a brief opportunity to view content before it's removed. So it's a challenge to code enforcement staff as we develop the film permit case. There's other nuisance cases that we can develop in a far simpler way, but because all of these eventually hit some, Michael, you would have some suggestions. TikTok, I know, is a big one. You can follow a specific influencer. So we have collaborated in some of those instances with the communications department to help us because they're much better social media detectives than I am to find. If we know that a party has occurred the next day, that evening, we start looking for content. Some cases, the communications department has found an announcement in advance so we can be prepared to collect evidence before the event occurs and then afterwards.
Thank you.
Maureen, it's Michael. As I listened to your presentation, I realized that the sheer diversity of the methodology of transmitting content has changed so dramatically that it is very difficult for us to police and keep track of every event that's going to take place. But I think if we recognize to the community that we are primarily concerned with gaining their support and their curiosity, their interest as to anything that's going on that seems out of the ordinary, for them to make contact with the city so that they in some ways can sort of be your outreach for what you really don't have access of finding out about. I think that will help educate them and give them a better sense of what course of action they can take. I was just reading, I think it was on Nextdoor, the last few days, about a whole series of complaints from people here within the city about certain places that were creating a lot of noise and they did not know what to do. And I realized that I was saying we have to give them some guidance as to whom they're to contact in any situation like that. And I think that when you get to the council meeting, you ought to have that information accessible so that the larger number of people that are watching will be able to access that information.
That's a good suggestion. We're happy to do that. We'd like to know. We don't have the capability to be everywhere all at once. So if somebody can tip us off to unusual activity, large trucks showing up at the house, no furniture moving in and out, boom cameras being pushed through a garage door, little things like that could help us to identify these events when they're where they're occurring.
By the way, I was just thinking as we were talking about this and having gone through the material, is there any way to request of the production entity that is doing it or the owner of the house to have a list of or show, or rather a display of the permit on site so that if anybody does question it, they have something to show them?
If the flip side of what we're talking about,
Yeah.
we want to welcome all legitimate filmmaking to Calabasas, whether it's digital or on film. And these ordinances are really designed to, this new ordinance, along with the much more detailed film permit process that the city has initiated. Those legitimate permits, Michael, would usually be held on the set by the production manager or the producer, or whomever is the production company representative, on the set.
Yeah,
So
I think
they are easily be accessible if the city monitor or an officer, a fire, monitor, a sheriff's officer needed to see them for any reason.
yeah, well,
Even a neighbor.
on the list, the subsequent list that we're going to go over to give to the production person, that a statement of some kind indicating the fact that the copy of the permit needs to be held on site. We can do, not in the ordinance, but we can do that in the subsequent document that we're going to work on.
And I've added that to that subsequent document as an idea from this evening. I think it's a good one.
Okay.
I had a question, which I mentioned earlier, but on under 5.04.060 permit application, I understand the city works miraculous and can get an application processed within 2 days, but why not have the production company submit it a little earlier, just in case there is a problem that's unforeseen, so the city has a little more leeway, so that they don't send something to you on Monday and expect to start filming on Wednesday? I mean, why do they need, I mean, why not 3 days or 4 days? I'm just not sure why it has to be like so urgent.
Normally, it's interesting. From city to city, it varies. In Los Angeles, you can literally get a permit in a day, if 2, if you needed it. Moving it to 3 days, wouldn't be really much of an issue, because I think that any legitimate film company finds their location, they start preparing in pre-production, for it, and they know up front, that they need to get their permits in, and they know that they may need an officer, a film monitor, so depending on the sensitivity of the location. So moving it to 3 days, I don't think would be, much of an issue, and that could be, certainly we can talk about that in the details of the film permitting process itself.
Well, but it's in here, it's in the ordinance, so we do need to talk about it then.
Yeah, we would recommend, if the intention was to shift to 3 days, that would be appropriate to recommend at this stage. I think on staff's thought that at the moment, the 2-day system is working with the legitimate film companies, but I'll defer back to Maureen on that one. And Michael, you guys are a little more on the ground than I am.
Yeah, it's an administrative question for the staff as to whether or not, if they can live with the 2 days, then I don't know why we need to change it, but that's up to them to respond.
I mean,
We're happy to move this to 3 days. That seems like a reasonable proposal to give us a little more time.
I mean,
the reality is that there is certainly an intent by staff to issue a permit as quickly as possible if we don't run into any of the big flag issues. And so what this ordinance does is allow us to check quickly for big flag issues like open code enforcement permits, a need to take a look at fire, sheriff, or other monitoring services for the shoot. And a signature from a property owner and a number of persons on site. Those are the big flags that we need to look at.
I just like the idea of that extra day, because you did talk about those, like Carrie said, legitimate companies are going to have it, they're going to know they're going to do this probably weeks in advance or many days in advance. And those that aren't so legitimate, that extra day, I think, gives you more time to deal with them.
Happy to do that if it's the wish of the commission.
Are we finding that,
Ah,
you know, are we finding that people are slipping by because there's only a 48-hour requirement?
I'm not sure that I would say that. I think the folks that don't come in for permits are the same folks who aren't going to come in for permits, whether it's 2 days or 3 days. There's
That's
this
what I'm
divide
thinking.
between
I hate to just
those
make
two.
it an arbitrary 72 hours if it's not really buying us anything.
I would say that this 2 working days has been part of the film ordinance for an extended period of time. So this is not any new provision that we are proposing to be modified, but we're happy upon reflection of this particular paragraph to modify that to 3 days, 5 days. The reality is that if somebody walked in and said, I really need to do X on Saturday and it's a Thursday, I think we could get it out the door if it's, again, a reasonable application for something that does not require outside agency efforts.
I have a comment. Let's not fix what isn't broken. If the system has been working with the 2 days and nobody is complaining about it, and most importantly, you can handle that, then
That would be my
we have a
position.
problem.
I'd agree with you, Michael. I'd say the same thing. I had a question on insurance. When a property owner, puts their house up for production use, more or less, and I didn't see it here in the code, but what's the insurance requirement between to get a permit issued between the production company's insurance and the property owner's insurance?
That I cannot tell you. I would tell you that the city has, as part of their permit requirements, various types of insurance that it's required for them to produce. So city attorney can go through some of those provisions. Those are in the permit and regulations right now, not in the ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah, I would add briefly that the city has 2 pieces to that are in the regs. One is that the permit holder and the property owner both agree to indemnify the city for any lawsuit or third-party claims that may be made against the city. And second, I think we require at least $1 million in general liability insurance to protect the city and to provide a backstop behind that indemnification clause. As to the further insurance that might be required between the property owner and the filmer, that's between those 2.
A lot of time, most of the time, a lot of insurance certificates are being sent out by the production company. Sometimes some of the locations, and we have some within Calabasas that are run through a location company. The location company would be on set, and they would also, the homeowner, make sure the homeowner is identified with an additionally insured for all the same coverages, plus possibly a deposit that the city wants to be identified for, as well. So believe me, the insurance certificates fly when there's a production. And as a homeowner, I don't think any homeowner would want anybody in their house or any business here in Calabasas that didn't supply appropriate insurance and be named additionally insured.
And question on page 5, maximum number of allowed persons is, I got 50 total, right? Between 50 period is the max that the general permit allows.
The 50,
There's an exceeds 50.
I saw that.
right. The 50 is a threshold in which now you're moving into having effectively a automatic trigger for the fire marshals through the county as well as sheriff to start to be on site. So that's the reason that the number 50 went in there. if we had a small house, let's say we've got this cutie little tiny cottage somewhere in the city that was 1,000 square feet, and they were filming some Hobbit thing and they wanted to put 50 people in that, or 30 people in that, we would say no, the house can't accommodate that group. And so the city would then have a condition upon permit in which we would ask for that same oversight simply because of the size of the house. I'll give you a very good example. We had a car commercial, a permit issued for a car commercial at a home, but the home had been ripped apart. It was under construction. So we immediately required the fire marshal to be there because all of the power was coming in through generators on a site that had no protection effectively, and on a site in which there were construction exposures. So there we called for that extra oversight through the fire department. So the 50-person here and that whole provision about allowed persons goes to a couple of other issues. It goes as well, Commissioner Castle, to the concerns about bringing in not traditional paid cast and crew, but 100 influencers who suddenly occupy a house with no oversight to the annex that occur within that facility. So again, difficult that they are going to seek a permit from us, but it's another safeguard, another provision under which we can move forward to shut down a facility like that through the city prosecutor.
What's the threshold for triggering a what I'll call a traffic event? So you got, somebody puts something up on Facebook and suddenly 150 cars converge on a residential street. At what point does the city decide you've gone too far and they have to have an enforcement action?
Immediately, if it depends on the seriousness of the violations. It depends on the frequency of the violations, but the first thing that the city has to do is collect evidence. So this goes back to Commissioner Sherman's comments relative to Commissioner Brockman's comments about how do we notify the public that we want this information. We have had some of these houses hold multiple large parties before the city even became aware of them. Now that sounds very strange that 300 people show up on your street in pretty raucous way, but no one calls a police department or sheriff department or the city on that till 2 or 3 days later. And the answer is that if I had 300 cars show up on my street with a big party going on next door, I might be afraid to squeal. And this is some of the other concerns that come into play here, that neighbors don't want to be unfairly targeted by trying to stop an event. So this is a tricky situation, and it's got to be, again, evidence-driven, but depending on the nature of the event, if we can show that multiple events have occurred, then we have sufficient grounds to go in, as we have on other occasions, to shut down a facility that's being used commercially. And remember, there's a number of different ways to approach these cases. We went through a very extensive process in 2018 and 19. We updated about 6 of the city's municipal codes in order to give us more tools and our city prosecutor more tools to shut these facilities down. This was among the remaining areas of the code that was identified for strengthening, and it's become very relevant in the last year. For the 2 facilities we have right now, there are active code enforcement cases with the city prosecutor.
And if I could add two more quick points on that. In terms of an event that happens, there's no hard and fast, 36 is fine, 37 is too many. There's no hard and fast number. It's when a resident has a concern about safety. Is it too many people that the road's no longer passable? Is it too many people that can reasonably be supported on the property given its size and characteristics? Are there, even if it's a small number of people, are they causing so much noise or dust or, the one where the backhoe was flying over the house, that safety concerns, that it's an obvious safety problem and they want to investigate it? If so, the recommendation is to consider calling both the code enforcement number, and I'll ask Maureen to recite the phone number. I don't have it memorized. And second,
I don't have it in front of me.
Because really we rely in a partnership between the city's code enforcement side and the sheriff's department. And the first line of defense for a safety concern is the sheriff's department, who can take a report, and depending on what's there and what's seen, they have a number of tools they use. And there are times, as we've seen, when a property's operation is concerning or illegal or a violation of our code, but not so severe as to generate a state law crime that the sheriffs will immediately arrest someone for. And in that delta, that's where the city relies on the resident to call sheriffs to come take a report, get some evidence. Then it goes to the city prosecutor, who then brings the case forward, and we can get an injunction, as we've done in a couple of cases, that won't necessarily solve it that night, but will solve it going forward. So in short, there's no hard line, but if there's a concern, or if residents feel that a situation is unsafe, make a phone call, and this ordinance will be part of the tools used.
So do you feel like, this is mostly to Maureen, do you feel like residents in general are aware that there's a permitting process in place, and that, they should feel free to question if they sort of feel like there's too much going on? And most people know it when they see it. It's not somebody's birthday party.
Absolutely. I'll tell you, we get the full gamut, and this is a true comment, true statement. When I first came to the city, we got a code enforcement complaint that a neighbor's trees rustled too loudly in the wind. All right. We had a party house with over 600 people in it on 2 or 3 occasions. And it was on the 4th occasion that we got 2 phone calls. Now, how do you explain that? I just don't know, but we absolutely encourage calls into the city when you suspect something, but more so now because of COVID-19. Any gathering of a group, it's not limited by number, but any gathering of a group of people outside the household is a violation of current public health orders. And we've been trying to work very hard. The HOAs have been great. Halloween is coming. On a simple issue like that, how do we get the word out? We're never going to stop trick-or-treaters on Halloween. That would be horrible. On the other hand, can it be done safely? And it can't be done safely if somebody takes their house, hires goons, goblins, and attracts 400 or 500 people. This is our focus, is the extremes. And these party houses, these influences, these content creators are very likely to be part of events that evening, but they are on a daily basis in some cases.
Maureen, may I asked a question about the permit hours. Before it was 100%, and now of consent to extend the hours, consent from current residents, and now you're moving it to 90%. So, I mean, I think you can look at it different ways, but some people might look at that residents are going to have less protection because that neighbor next door who's afraid or who's worried about rustling or afraid of people at night loses out to the other 90% who say yes, even though their house is right next door.
You're talking, Richard, about a legitimate film permitted that wants to shoot earlier than 7 o'clock in the morning or later than 7 o'clock at night?
Yeah, to midnight.
Right. Well, that can all be taken care of through the permitting process and the signature thing.
But not if it says not if it says here 90% signatures instead of 100% signature of consent.
Yeah, it's almost impossible to get 100%. And if you have 10 neighbors and only 9 sign up, you're okay. But if you don't have the 10th, you can't shoot the extra hours. We want to be as film friendly as we possibly can. And
but I think we have to balance film friendly with resident comfort and safety. How's it been working? I guess this is for Maureen and certainly Carrie, others. How it hasn't been working well. That's why you want to change it from 100% to 90%.
This is a discussion that occurred with the task force as well as the film commission. The original net was 500 feet. That was felt to be too excessive. The film commission requested that the 100% signature collection was also problematic for a legitimate film shoot because some people could abuse that request to hold hostage the film company for that last signature. I'll have Matt speak a little more to this issue, but the way that this is worded, it says your application has to be brought to us. And the city uses those signatures to evaluate whether or not to extend the permit. So if you've been a really awful film group and annoyed all your neighbors, you're unlikely to get those 90%. Likewise, if you came in with 80% and the city had some knowledge of the last couple of holdouts, they could make a fair evaluation as to whether or not that film permit still should go through. But I'll let the city attorney address this issue.
Well, I just want to, before you guys, I just want to make sure my question is properly asked. Has it been a problem in the past? Because like earlier you said, don't fix it if it's not broken, because I'm not as concerned about what the film commission says. I'm concerned about what our task force says and what our city says based on our own experiences, not mine personally, but in filming here in the city. And, so I haven't had that question answered yet.
I'm not aware of any situation in which the addresses were, or the consent was requested.
And I'm not sure that, I think that's right. I'm not sure that it's been a problem so far to have the 100% consent requirement from in-person permittees coming to us and complaining they can't get that last signature, or more often the last signature is too expensive. But on the good governance side, the film commission recommended it because their concern is not giving absolute veto rights to any particular person. Our focus is on ensuring a bit of a balance between protecting the residents and not delegating our permitting power to the residents. Hence the requirement to allow a bit of an escape valve. 90% is quite a high bar, but it's not everybody. So there's a bit of an escape valve.
One last, I'm sorry, Michael.
No, go ahead, Richard.
I would just, one last question about this from my point. So if the holdout, they're not trying to get money from the production company. Maybe they're just afraid. They live alone. They're afraid at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night of the noise, or just people in the neighborhood that they don't live there walking around or driving up and down the street. So my question is, can that person appeal to somebody, go to the city organization that handles this?
Yes. Yeah, so there is an appeal process. I believe it's from the film office to the city manager, and I think from there to the city council. And the ordinance does provide for the film office and the city manager to, even with the signatures in hand, still look at the situation and say, for this site, for this application, midnight's too far, we'll do 7 to 10 or 7 to 11. So there's some opportunities for, on a case-by-case basis, imposing more, getting the signatures doesn't generate an entitlement to go all the way to midnight. It's the first step to the application to go all the way to midnight. Then it becomes testing the rest of the application and looking at what they're doing.
I appreciate, that's a great point. I don't know if residents understand that.
Yeah, I mean, they may not, and part of this is going to be, as this moves forward, an education process, both with the filming community to say, hey, we're open for filming. We welcome, productions of all stripes, even including modern influencer productions, if they come in and get the permits and follow the rules. We welcome them. Come in, apply for the permits. Here's the process. And then a separate education campaign, or flavors of the same, for the residents to say, hey, if you've got problems in your community, call the city. Here's the new rules. Here's the regulations. Here's who to call. And here's what we're doing about it. And I know that there are plans in the works to do that as this process moves forward.
Thank you. Michael, you had a question or comment?
Well, I just want to add that everybody knows that in addition to this percentage, which is hard to grasp in the abstract, there will be a map, according to what we talked about, a map that the city gives to the production company that designates the properties that are surrounding the house that's going to be used for the production, the ones that they have to get cleared, so that people will know in advance that they're coming, they're asked for their approval. On the extended time, which is a little more of a crunch, I think the flexibilities that they're talking about in terms of evaluating the whole situation, the request of the production company, if there's somebody next door who really is upset about the situation, they'll have to make some adjustments. I had another couple of questions that I just wanted to bring up for discussion.
And Michael, while you're looking those questions up, one quick comment on this exact issue about bordering. The last point I'll note there is that this is intention to be determined by the city, who will look at the complete map. So if you have a property that has a large backyard and backs up to 4 or 5 other houses, they may not be on the same street. They may not even be in the same HOA or the same neighborhood, but they still border it, so that they'll be included in this notice and signature category. And that's something for folks to think about, because we understand completely the properties that affect you aren't just the ones that are your neighbor's front door to front door. It's also the ones that are behind you, or, across the way, or down or upslope.
And it is the entire film shoot area. So I'll let you know that they just did a 2-day film shoot in my neighborhood at one house, and trucks were lined up for 2 blocks. So the entire area affected by that film shoot was much, much larger than the one little house. So that's why we retained in this the right of the city to determine who gets to have a say. I know that we spoke with the task force about, does that include the guy across the street? Well, yeah, if he's got a truck parked in front of him for a couple of days, or a generator running that he can hear, that person gets a say as well, so we can make that determination. So the film borders would be very flexible.
I have a question regarding, it's at the top of page 5. And it has to do with, it says to extend beyond the 20 days, an applicant shall be required to obtain approval from the city council at the next available meeting. That sounds a bit strange because these issues usually come up at the last minute and we don't have meetings to go to the council. Why does this have to go to the council?
It does not. It does not. It could go anywhere. It could go to the city manager. But this is a holdover from the original versions of your film permit.
God, we said that.
In the city of Calabasas, I will tell you that the council is the first person to receive a complaint. And if a council member receives a lot of complaints, oftentimes they want to be involved in the outcome of those complaints. We are happy to change this as
Well, it seems
might recommend or as the council might recommend.
And I'll just note that the, as noted, that is the current ordinance. And I think it largely functions as a very strong signal to a filming applicant. If they want to go 21 or more days, they better have a very good case and plan ahead.
Yeah, that's fine if they're coming in at the outset and in the early discussions, you're saying, no, we're going to need 20, 22 days, et cetera. There you have the time for proper evaluation on procedure. But if it occurs where they have within the 20 days and they're okay, and all of a sudden they run into a problem and they have to extend, there's no time to go to the council. So it depends upon when the issue arises.
That's true. And at that point, they would have two choices. One would be to make a request to the council or to the mayor, who can schedule a special meeting. And of course, we don't do that on a regular basis. Second would be they'll have to pause filming. So if the council,
isn't it city council or their designee or in conjunction with the city manager? Because the city council doesn't even meet 1 month during the summer.
We're happy again to revise this. It could be to the CDC. We typically don't like to take a matter like this from a practical standpoint into a commission or a council setting unless a problem exists. And I think that there is enough discretion in these rules that permit staff, if there has been no issues, to find a creative way of extending the dates.
I think, yeah, we would support if that was to be revised to be the city manager rather than the council. And the city manager could, and if there was a, and I should, one thing I should note here is this 20-day limit applies in two cases or two ways. One is to a given film permit application. Is it, 20 days of shooting or 30 days? And that would certainly be appropriate if otherwise compliant with the rules and a good filming neighbor, city manager could easily approve more time. It also applies to a given location, is a max of 20 days without council approval. So if you had a house where they're renting it every other week to a new sitcom production, and they're trying to turn it into a permanent film studio in a way where the neighbors have complained and they've generated sheriff's calls and they've generated the problems, then that might be the kind of case where we would look at it, might well say, no, you've got your 20 days, that's what you get. Or if we were to revise this to be city manager, the manager might say, no, you can appeal up to council. And the council could look at it and say, well, you've either no, or you've somehow convinced that you'll be a better neighbor than you have been and give additional time. So that's where we want to make sure we keep in place this limit absent higher approval. But I think we're okay. I think staff would be okay with making that manager rather than council.
Mm-hmm. It's just more practical.
Any other discussion points at this point? Are the commissioners have any other comments or questions?
I think there's a minor typo in on page 5. If you want to save me a lot of emails, you can fix it right now. Section E, maximum number of persons, allowed persons, subparagraph A. Shall not approve such that request. I think that was supposed to come out.
Where are you?
Correct, we got that one already. Thank you. I think Commissioner Brockman spotted that as well, but thank you, Commissioner Castle.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions at this point?
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's, should we, do we need to do any voting, Matt, or at this point?
Yeah, it would be a motion and a second and a vote to recommend approval by the city council of this ordinance
Do we
with
have-
the amendments.
do we have a motion for a,
I would make the motion to approve
Second.
the document as amended with the discussion tonight.
I'll second the motion.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the motion is approved. Thank you.
If I could, for the record, note that the modifications recommended are to move from 2 working days to 3 working days for a permit application, to modify the extension beyond 20 days of filming from the city council to the city manager.
Maureen, didn't we agree to leave the 2 days in?
Thought we were going to leave the 48 hours in place.
All right, I can do that. I didn't quite
Yeah,
hear.
no, I think they
I
left.
think I
it.
had
They
the
wanted to keep that.
same.
Okay, so I have one amendment then, which is to designate the city manager as opposed to the city council as the deciding authority for an extension beyond a 20-day period.
Mhm.
All right, thank you.
Okay,
And thank you to all for your review, your support of this. Next time you'll see this is when we get around to modifications to the rules and regulations, as well as to reviewing the permit that we are currently using right now to make sure that that's as complete as possible. And we'll start that effort shortly.
Maureen, when is this scheduled to go to the council? Is it on October? No.
October 14th at this point.
So that if approved there, this would go into effect, how many days thereafter? 30? Is it 30 days beyond or?
It's October 14th for first reading. Then it would be the next meeting for second reading, October 28th, then 30 days from there.
Okay, so it's the beginning of the year, basically, beginning of 2021.
Well, 1 month, it'd be end of November. So
Yeah. Okay.
there's always
November, okay.
lag.
Yeah.
What is, if it's approved by the council, I assume it will be, will people throughout, I mean, will the residents be put on notice that this has been passed? So I think that's what goes on in a lot of these things. They always think somebody else is, if there's a problem, that somebody else is going to call it in, so to speak. I think
I do think we'll take some steps through the communications department to publicize that this has been approved, not just to the film community, but also to the residents. Probably, maybe not a mailer to every resident, but the website, social media tools, the HOAs, and the other kind of communications channels that we have.
Because I really feel like, you know, if you see a bunch of white production trucks in front of a house, I think most people always think, well, it's legitimate and there's that many trucks out there. Somebody at the city must have approved it. So.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, I think that's kind of the natural instinct, but I would note if you see those trucks or see that situation and you're not sure, there's no harm in calling.
Exactly.
And the city will confirm it. And that's what I'll say. Maureen, what is the number? Would it be the general number?
I have not had an opportunity to look that up, but I will make sure that when I work with Director Russo that we will definitely publicize that hotline number, but if the city is open any day, number here is 818-224-1600.
Yeah, along those lines, when production is in progress, are there any posted signs saying this is a permitted production?
Not at this time.
But I think that's one thing we can look at adding through the regulations is having some sort of a sign up that says,
Mhm.
you know, permit issued and
Yeah.
copy of permit.
I think that-
That way folks can kind of like, you know, for building and demolition work, if you've got
Yeah.
a permit issued, that's on the front of the property.
So that is in effect right now or not? Yeah.
No, not currently, but that would be part of what we will intend to change with the revised regulations that come behind this ordinance.
Okay. Great.
Very good. All right. Next item is future agenda items. Director Russo, would you like to bring us up to date on some of the future items?
No presentation at all on either of those items at this point.
Okay. And I don't see anything else at this point that we need to talk about, unless there are any. Commissioner Sherman?
Yeah, I just have one question. So, can we have like an update next month on, I know it's a slow process, but as far as where things, you know, the moving process regarding wireless and changing wireless, not 5G, but just the way, you know, that we've been working, the council's been working on, and just kind of an update.
Sure, I know we're looking at sometime likely early next year, maybe around spring. Matt, would you concur with that?
Yeah, I'm double checking my notes on when we're going to have those ready. Something, and perhaps even earlier, I think we were working on the draft. The next step will be to bring it back to the subcommittee, the actual draft ordinance to the subcommittee to take a look at it and sit with it. It's a pretty lengthy document, so that may take a little bit of time. But I think certainly CTC early next year, if not in December, would be the goal. And then we'll have it to the subcommittee by week or two for their review, and then we'll go from there. And I just did double check. I've got a draft on my desk from Michael Klein, so it's certainly moving forward.
Thank
Good.
you.
Unless there are any other comments or questions, we will adjourn till our normal meeting, October 20th, 2020 at 5 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Thank you all. Everybody, have a good evening.